Welcome to Diligent Canine. This is part 5 of the detection video series, and I'm going to talk about adding duration and distraction as well as variable rewards. Okay, so if you've been following along, you know that in part 1 we talked about finding the left leg, part 2 we talked about following the left leg, Part 3, we talked about turns and rear end awareness, and in Part 4, we talked about changes in position and pace. So in this video, I'm actually not going to show any footage of working with my dog. I've posted that lots of times before on social media for you guys to check out all the different places and situations that I put my dog in for healing. It's probably my most common public obedience or my most practiced public obedience, aside from things like sits and downs and that sort of thing. Healing is a really good tool to keep your dog focused on you, both for the dog's safety, for other people, other animals' safety when you're going out to pet-friendly stores or to parks or just out in public in general with your dog. So, lots of opportunities, lots of practical applications to training your dog to heal in public. And I also posted a video, or I recorded a video, I'm not sure when it will be released, how public obedience can help your dog. So, not just keep them safe, but help alleviate some anxiety in those public places if you've sort of put in the work on the back end to build a familiarity with that behavior. How do we then go about adding duration and distraction to our healing? Just like any other behavior, we'll need to do this very gradually. So if you think back to the very beginning stages with your dog, you may teach them to sit down, stay. In the classroom inside your house, where you teach them the behaviors, be that your living room, the garage, the basement, spare bedroom, the kitchen, wherever the place is that you can have the most control over in your house and you can remove the most distraction from. Just like you would gradually add stimulation to that environment, be it furniture, toys, a vacuum cleaner, then you might move to the backyard, then to the front yard, then to a few houses down your street, to the next block over, and then maybe in a parking lot of a store, then in front of a store, and then eventually in the store. So you kind of see a gradual progression there, and that stepwise process can be used for any behavior, and healing isn't an exception to that. So what I would suggest, though, is to not increase both those variables, distraction and duration, at the same time. I would pick one. It doesn't necessarily have to be one that you focus on for a long period of time, though that may help sort of build some momentum. You can vary. Okay, today I'm going to try to go for some longer duration healing, and then tomorrow maybe I just try to add some distraction. I think there's benefit both ways. Obviously, if you don't want to focus on one thing so long that the dog goes flat in the other categories, so I don't want to focus so long on duration, for example, that my dog loses interest in the activity because he's having to wait through 2, 3, 5 minutes of healing before he gets his reward. So I need to keep it interesting to the dog. Fortunately, if you watched all the videos so far, you know that the reason I taught those I explained those in different components and different chunks is that you can mix it up. You can keep the routine fresh for your dog. So you're not just always taking 20 paces straight forward before you walk backwards and then 10 paces before you turn left. Okay, so you're mixing it up. You're keeping the dog engaged and focused on the activity. So the same thing with distraction. You don't necessarily want to overwhelm the dog, not because of the initial level of distraction, but the length of which that distraction is implied. So all of that is going to accumulate stress, even if it's just somebody with a clatter stick or some hand clappers, a jug of rocks. I've used all those things in videos before, But the longer you keep using them, that is in like any given repetition, that's still adding stress to the dog. So you have to be mindful of that. You also have to be mindful that stress is cumulative. So if you work a dog under really high stress, really high levels of stimulation, several days in a row, that builds up. It's not like a fresh start every day. So again, that's why it's a good reason to maybe you're focusing on increasing stimulation for a couple days, but then you back the stimulation off and just go for duration, adding length, more steps, more time, more complex patterns of healing. Something I do want to for sure mention in this video is don't be afraid to go back to luring. So after you've successfully like faded lures and you give a verbal command, your dog comes to a perfect heel on your left side, is looking up at you, and they can do that with all those behaviors that I explained in the other videos. Don't be afraid to go back to don't be afraid to go back to luring. Sometimes you're probably going to have to, and that's a really good way, especially when you're talking about increased stress, is to remind the dog that, hey, focus over here. You know what you're doing. You know how to do this. We're going to be okay. And that's the part that I expanded upon in the other video about public obedience alleviating stress for dogs. So the way you sort of overcome those increases in stress is that you make it gradual. And we're talking about stress in terms of distraction. You make it gradual, a gradual increase, and your job is to reassure the dog that that's not a big deal. That other stress, that other stuff, don't worry about it. I'll handle that. Your job is to focus on me. So just like you would socialize or generalize any other behavior, you would socialize the dog or generalize their behavior. This is exactly what we're doing here. You're generalizing those healing patterns that you taught in your living room or your backyard to public places or to places where there are going to be higher levels of distraction. So you can get super creative with this. I like truck stops. I like parks. Parks are particularly good, not dog parks, by the way, human parks, because you can sort of choose your level of engagement. Usually there are other people, usually there are other cars, and there's a pretty good chance there's some other dogs or wildlife as well. But at like a state park or something like that, you can choose your engagement or proximity. So, I can maybe choose one open lot area to work my dog, to practice with them, and he can see and smell other people and other dogs running and playing, but they might be 100, 200 yards away, right? So it's going to be pretty easy to redirect my dog to me. And if it's not, then, maybe we're not ready for that. And we can gradually work our way closer to those other people and to those other animals as our skill as a team increases to something like a pet store. I've posted lots of videos going to PetSmart and doing healing patterns in front of the adoption cat area of the store, things like that. Obviously, you want to keep safety in mind as well when you are increasing stimulation, whether it is the safety of other animals or the safety of your animal if you're at, like I mentioned, a truck stop or at the side of a roadside pull-off area. Those are all plenty stimulating places, but you obviously need to keep safety in mind. So this would be a really bad time to say we're going to go completely off leash and see what the dog can really perform at. That's a bad idea. Don't be stupid. Protect your dog, protect other animals, keep them on a leash. So even if you have an e-collar, which I do use, I think they're great tools, there's a reaction lapse that happens that you're going to have to push that button if the dog, say, does break the heel when a car or a person walks by. And depending on your proximity to them, you may or may not have enough time to push the button on the remote or something like that. So it's a really good idea to keep a leash. You can, of course, let it loose. You can A 6-foot leash is plenty long enough to have on your dog's collar or harness and draped around your back and over your shoulder is a good way to sort of shorten that leash. You can still keep some pressure on it. Of course, you can shorten the leash. You can use a 3-foot or a 2-foot tab line or just a shorter leash and get a similar kind of effect where you maintain some emergency control over the dog if need be. You can also use tools like that to redirect the dog's focus to you obviously with leash pressure and things like that. I might cover that in another video. But since we're coming close to running out of time here, I will mention variable rewards like I said I would. So what that means is eventually, so when you teach a dog a behavior, the reward ratio is fixed. It's 1-to-1. You perform the behavior, you get a reward. You perform the behavior, you get a reward every time. What a variable ratio will be is just that. The ratio is not fixed and it varies. So sometimes you might have to perform the behavior twice to get a reward. Sometimes you might perform it once and get a reward. Sometimes you might have to perform it 3 times. And it's also randomized. So it's not just once, twice, 3 times, once, twice, 3 times. It might be 3 times, then once, then twice, then once again, then 3 times again. Something like that. And that's pretty easy to think of in terms of healing because you can take 1 step, 2 steps, and reward right when they come to position, things like that. And what that does is it keeps motivation super high for the dog. And it keeps them really motivated to perform because they're not sure when they're going to get a reward. And this isn't the sort of like nervous anticipation where they lose interest. It's the opposite. It's like a slot machine effect rather than a vending machine effect. Okay, so a vending machine, you put your dollar in, you get your soda or snack, and that's what's expected. 1 payment, 1 reward. Or you put something in, you get something out. But a slot machine is randomized. If you play long enough, you're going to hit the jackpot. But sometimes that jackpot is every 50 spins on a slot machine. Sometimes it's every 5,000 spins. So that's a variable reward system, simply explained. Something else that I will throw in here at the end, even though I'm over my 10-minute mark. So this video, I guess, won't be on Instagram, but I digress. Something else I found helpful is to have a partner or a partner to function as not necessarily a judge, but like a steward. So I've done this with roommates, with friends, when I go to parks or public places. I'll give them a list of commands, say 5 things, say like forward, backward, left, right, and turn around or about turn. And I'll tell them that they can pick any of those 5 commands, just shout them out loud, and we'll go for, say, maybe a timed duration rather than steps. So maybe like 1 minute, maybe 30 seconds, and I'll call my dog to a heel position. I'll have my friend pick whatever he wants. Say forward. I start heeling forward with my dog. Give the heel command. Then my friend says left, and I turn left, and I keep going with my dog. And just sort of let them randomly pick any of those commands, and that's a good way to proof those behaviors so that you're not sort of mentally anticipating, okay, next I turn left, then in 5 steps I'm going to turn right. It's a good way to proof off any sort of nonverbal cueing from your body that you're not aware of because you're thinking about, you're anticipating the next move. Obviously, that's going to translate into your body in really subtle ways that you might not pick up on, but your dog will. So, once again, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a DM or an email asking about it. I'll be sure to get it into the Q&A video series, and until next time, thank you for your support of military and working dogs.